In this video, we're going to be learning lesson 27, solving equations by factoring. So now we get into the why. We have been learning all of this about factoring and how to factor completely and all the different steps that it takes. Why is that important? Well, let's think back for a moment on basic multiplication. Let's say we have two numbers. We don't know what they are, but we'll call them W times Y. If this equals 0, what do we know about W or Y? Well, one of these factors has to be 0. In order to get 0 as their answer to the multiplication question, then either W is 0 or Y is 0. Or it could even be that both of them are 0. And when we don't know what the other variable is, W being 0 and Y being 0 are both correct answers. So hang on to that for just a minute, and we're going to go through and solve an equation. We have this, solve for x. And the equation is 2x squared plus 3x equals 2. Now what I want us to do is to always start by putting everything on the same side so that the other side can equal 0. That's going to come in important, but we always want to start with make the equation equal 0. That's always our first step. So to do that, I have this 2 on the other side. I have all of this on one side, 2 on the other. It's going to be easiest to move the 2 over. So when I do that, I just subtract from both sides. I have 2x squared plus 3x minus 2 equals 0. Okay, so I have this equation equaling 0. Now the next thing I want to do is factor the equation. So I got to use my factoring skills. I see a 2x squared here, so I'm going to start with a 2x. And then the only thing to multiply 2x by to get 2x squared would be an x. And the whole thing equals 0. I have to keep my equation, even though I'm factoring this side. Now this 2 is either 2 and 1 or 1 and 2. There's only one set of factors for the 2, and I want it to subtract this difference to be 3. So since 3 is bigger than 2, I think I need to put the big numbers together. So on my outside, I'll have 4x. So my inside will be 1x. 4x, and then I'll have 1x. One of these needs to be negative in order to have a positive 3x for my answer. So if I want it to be positive, then I probably need my big number to be positive, my little number to be negative. So I'm going to put the negative in front of the 1. So now I have factored my equation. And now what do? Well, go back to our either W equals 0 or Y equals 0, or they both equal 0. This is a factor, and this is a factor. One of these factors has to equal 0, or both of them could. So I'm going to say 2x minus 1 equals 0, or x plus 2 equals 0. And now I have very simple little equations that I can solve for x. So I'm going to add the 1 over here. That adds up to 0, so I have 2x equals 1, and then I divide by 2, and I get that x equals 1/2. Over here, I'm going to subtract the 2 on both sides, and I will have that x equals -2. So my last step was to set each factor equal to 0. And that's what I did, and I got this answer and this one. Now I'm going to erase in between, and I'm going to plug it into our original equation to make sure that both of these work, because there's two answers here. They can't both work, right? We just need one answer? Well, let's find out. I'll start with the 1/2 over here. So I'm putting 1/2 in every time I have an x. Does that equal 2? 1/2 squared. Now squared means I have 1/2 times 1/2. When I'm multiplying fractions, I multiply the top and I multiply the bottom. So 1/2 squared actually becomes a smaller fraction. It becomes 1/4. So I have 2 times 1/4. And 3 times 1/2 equals 3/2. Is that equal to 2? 2 times 1/4 makes it 2/4, which is the same thing as 1/2. So 1/2 plus 3/2, what is that? It's 4/2. Is that equal to 2? Yes, it is. So this one works. Let's try -2. Surely it can't have two answers. 2. I got to put the -2 inside the parentheses. I need to square the -2. So squaring a -2 will give me 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 3 times -2 is going to be a -6. Is that equal to 2? 8 minus 6? It sure is. So both of these answers work. As it turns out, when you have an x squared, you will usually have 2 correct answers. 2 different answers can be plugged in when the equation has an x squared in it. What do you think, how many answers would it be if there was an x cubed in it? Most of the time, we're used to seeing one x and we have one solution. I just told you that an x squared means you'll have 2 solutions. So something with an x cubed is probably going to have 3 solutions. All right, let's do another example. 2x squared plus 8 equals 7x plus 2. And we're told, solve for x. Well, my cheat sheet over here says I need to make the equation equal 0. So I'm going to move the 7x over, and I'm going to move the 2 over. So this side now becomes 0. I have 2x squared minus 7x, and then I have 8 minus 2. So I'm going to go ahead and combine those. 8 minus 2 is a plus 6. All of that equals 0. Okay, I did the first part. Now I need to factor. How do I factor this? I'm going to go ahead and take this one because I know it has to be 2x and x. On this 6, I have a lot of different options. This 7 is a -7, but it's a positive 6. That means that the two things multiply together to be a positive number. It means they must both be negative because they have to add up to be a negative number, but they multiply to be a positive number. So I'm going to put my negatives in between. And then I have a lot of choices on 6. It can be 6 and 1, or it can be 2 and 3. If I use 6 and 1, I'm probably going to get a little bit bigger number. Either I put a 6 here, I multiply and get 12, or I put the 1 here and I get 2 plus 6, which would be 8. So I probably want to break that 6 up into a 2 and a 3. And I'm not positive which way it goes, but let's just try. Here, if I use 3 and 2, my outside is a 4x and my inside is a 3x. And 3 plus 4 gives me 7. So I'm pretty sure that's it. But just in case, let me check my other number. Let's say I had put the 3 over here. So 2 and 3 would have been 6 plus 2 more. So 6 plus 2 is 8, a little too high. Okay, so here are my factors, and they equal 0. So my last step is to set each factor equal to 0. So 2x minus 3 equals 0, and x minus 2 equals 0. Now I just have to solve my little equation. I have two different ones to solve. This one is super easy. If I add the 2 to the other side, I get that x equals 2. This one a little harder. I'm going to take an extra step. 2x is equal to 3. Then I divide by 2, and I get that x is equal to 3 halves. Just like the first one, I can always go back and plug this in. Both of these numbers will work. I do want to point out that there are times when you solve it that you go back in and check and one of the numbers or both of the numbers don't work. That usually happens when we get into a little bit more complicated equations in our Algebra 2 class, but I do want to point out that you should always go back and check. In the MUS lesson that we have this time, both of your answers should work. But you can always make sure that they do, that you've done the equation right, that you've factored correctly by plugging these numbers back in. So I'll just do one of them really quick. Up here, I'm going to have to rewrite that side. 7x plus 2. So if I plug in 2, I have 2 squared, which is 4, times 2 is 8. So I have 8 plus 8 right here. And then I have 2 times 7, which is 14 plus 2. So this side is 16, and this side is 16. So this one works. Maybe I should prove to myself that the 3 halves works. It's a little more complicated. 3 halves squared is 9/4. When I multiply 9/4 times 2, that makes it 18/4. And then when I divide top and bottom by 2, I get 9 halves. So 9 halves plus 8 needs to be equal to 3 halves times 7. That's going to be 21 halves plus 2. Now I'm going to change these into halves so that I can add them together. So 8 is the same thing as 16 halves, and 2 is the same thing as 4 halves. 9 plus 16 is 25. So I have 25 halves. And 21 plus 4 is 25 halves. So it works. All right, let's do one that isn't just x squared. Now, I had said if it was x squared, it would have 2 solutions, and this one is x cubed. So I think we're going to have 3 solutions. Let's see how to factor this. I see that I can take out a 2, and I can also take out an x. So I'm going to factor that by doing a 2x. What I'm left with up here is an x squared, and over here it's a minus 9. And that's equal to 0. Our first step was already done for us. It was set equal to 0. So now I'm factoring. I don't want to stop here. I want to make sure that my factors only have an x in them. If there's an x squared in there, it's not going to be easy for me to solve. So I want to go ahead and factor this x squared minus 9 as an x plus 3 and an x minus 3. Now it's factored completely, and I can set each factor equal to 0. So either 2x equals 0, or x plus 3 equals 0, or x minus 3 equals 0. If 2x is equal to 0, I could divide by 2, but I still get 0, so x is equal to 0. That's an answer. Just because it's equal to 0, it's an answer. So x could be 0. This one I'll subtract the 3 over, so x is equal to negative 3. This one I'll add the 3, so x would be equal to positive 3. So let's go back up and check. If I put in 0 here and 0 here, I'd get 0 minus 0 is 0. That one works. What about the negative 3? Negative 3 cubed is negative 27 times 2 is negative 54. What about negative 3 times a negative 18? Turns out that that's a positive 54 because the negative times a negative. And negative 54 and positive 54 add up to 0. You can imagine that if I put the positive 3 in this side, same number, but it will be positive now. And this side would be a negative 18 times a positive, so it would be a negative 54. and that is still 0. So all of these work. All right, what if I have x squared minus 8x equals negative 16? How many solutions are we looking for in this case? Well, it's x squared, so 2. I need to make the equation equal 0, so I'm going to add the 16 to both sides. And I have x squared minus 8x plus 16 equals 0. Factor it. So it's an x squared, so I don't have to have any numbers up front. I'm looking for factors of 16 that will add up to 8. Well, the only way I can do that is a 4 and a 4. They need to add up to negative 8, but multiply to be positive 16, so they must both be negative. Now I set each factor equal to 0. And I get x equals 4 or x equals 4. So remember, I told you that this should have 2 solutions, but it's the same number. It still has 2 solutions. It's just that both of them are the same number. So in the end, you could say that it's just x equals 4. When we learn how to graph these and what these solutions mean, you'll see that it does hit 4, and it will curve at 4 when you graph it because it was twice that was that solution. All right, one last example. It says find the solution set for 2x squared plus 6x equals 8. The solution set is still just the solution set because it's going to be more than one answer. So I'm going to make the equation equal 0 by moving that 8 to the other side. When I move it, it becomes a negative 8. Now I need to factor this. I can pull a 2 out first. I think I want to do that and make it a little easier. Now this is a little bit easier to factor. So I have an x and an x. I want them to multiply together to be negative 4, but add up to a positive 3. So I think a positive 4 and a negative 1 will do that for me. And now I need to set each factor equal to 0. So right here I have 2 equals 0. Well, that's not true. That's not possible. So it turns out that you really could just ignore this 2. There's no variable here to solve for. So we just have 2 equations then to solve for x. This one becomes x equals negative 4, and this one is x equals 1. If you want to write it in a solution set, you can write it like this, negative 4, comma 1. These are my 2 solutions. You can leave it as x equals negative 4 and x equals x equals positive 1. So either of these answers would be correct.